Hello and welcome to the Fit to Transform podcast, where you learn how to train and diet effectively and, most importantly, how to maintain those results for life, once and for all. I'm Nikias Tomasiello, a transgender training and nutrition coach working online with anyone who's ready for a true lifestyle transformation, anywhere they may be in the world. As a friendly reminder, any and all information provided is for educational purposes only. You should consult with your doctor before implementing any changes to your diet and exercise program. With that disclaimer out of the way, thank you for being here. Now grab yourself a cup of tea or pre-workouts and enjoy. Yo, dear listeners, hello and welcome to the podcast, and thank you for tuning into this solo episode, where I want to cover how to increase your calories back to maintenance after fat loss without fat regain. This is the second episode that I wanted to record as a solo episode about maintenance calories. Now, I took a little break after recording the first one, which I released a couple of weeks ago. I drank a little water and we're ready to rock. So, you're listening to this because you've completed or you're about to complete your latest fat loss phase successfully. Congratulations on your hard work. And now it's time to go back to maintenance calories. But how do you do that without also regaining body fat? Now, I completely understand if you're afraid of regaining that fat. It happens to all my clients after a well-executed fat loss phase, including my more experienced ones who have done more than one fat loss phase. And it happens to me too, because who wants to see all of their efforts seemingly wasted? That's why I'm recording this episode. I want to prepare you for what's to come, and I want to share my most successful strategies to stop dieting without losing the results of all your hard work. First of all, let's understand how your maintenance calories may change after a fat loss diet. Compared to before the start of the diet, you're likely to experience a reduction in calories compared to your starting maintenance for two main reasons. First off, smaller bodies burn fewer calories, so you won't need as many calories to maintain a lighter body weight if you're doing similar amounts of physical activity. And this is a permanent change. In episode 116, I interviewed Dr. Eric Trexler on metabolism and fat loss, and he mentioned a paper by Rosenbaum and colleagues in which the authors reported that for every 10% of original body mass lost, your total daily energy expenditure, which means your maintenance calories, can decrease by up to 25%, although the specific number will obviously depend on the individual. So if you've only lost a very small amount of body weight, then perhaps your maintenance calories aren't going to change at all. But the more you lose, especially when you approach 5, 10% and more, the more likely you are to also see a suppression of your original maintenance calories. Second, the longer your fat loss phase, the larger your calorie deficit, and or the more weight you lose, the greater the degree of metabolic adaptation that your body can undergo. And I referred to metabolic adaptation in the previous episode, the previous solo episode I recorded. But as a quick summary, when metabolic adaptation occurs, your body becomes more efficient at burning calories. So you expend fewer calories than you did before when you're doing the exact same activities, whether they are conscious activities or whether they are subconscious. This is your body's attempt at reducing and eventually eliminating your caloric deficit, and it's likely an evolutionary defense mechanism against starvation. For this reason, your maintenance calories decrease more than what would be expected solely from going from a bigger to a smaller body. But metabolic adaptation can be reversed, or at least the majority of it can be reversed, most likely, by returning to maintenance calories. So the suppression of calories that comes from metabolic adaptation is temporary, whereas the suppression of maintenance calories that comes from going from a bigger body to a smaller body is permanent. Importantly, these reductions in your maintenance calories occur in comparison to your starting maintenance calories, not to your deficit calories. So if you've been losing fat on 14 to 1500 calories, your post-diet maintenance calories are going to be higher than 14 to 1500 calories. But if at the start of the diet you were maintaining on 21 to 2200 calories, your post-diet maintenance will likely be a little lower than this number, assuming one of the two factors I've just mentioned have taken place. Moving on, I'm going to talk you through a couple of methods to calculate your new maintenance calories. The first option, which is my preferred option for all of my clients, is to use your own data. And I prefer it because it's more personalized and therefore more likely to be accurate. So here's a step-by-step guide to the calculations. I recommend that maybe right now, if you're doing something else, like you're driving or walking, and you can't write things down, you make a note to come back to this part of the podcast when you can take some notes, because I am going to be talking about math. So prepare yourself for the math. Step number 1. You want to work out the average rate of body weight loss that you've undergone in the last 4 weeks. So, for example, let's make it super simple. You lost a pound every single week. You add up all of those ones, so it's 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. That's 4, right? Then you divide it by the number of weeks. So you do 4 divided by 4. That's a pound per week. Step number 2. You multiply the outcome of the first step by 3,500, which is roughly the amount of calories in 1 pound of body fat. Or if you're using kilograms, then you're going to use the number 7,700. So it's 3,500 for pounds, 7,700 for kilograms, because obviously 1 kilogram is 2.2 pounds. So you need more calories. There are more calories in 1 kilo than in a pound. So if you multiply 3,500 by the outcome of step 1, in the case of my super simple example, 3,500 times 1 is 3,500. What you've got now is the weekly average deficit from the last 4 weeks. So every week in the last 4 weeks, if you were losing a pound, you were consuming 3,500 calories below your maintenance for the week. So now you need your calorie deficit for every single day. So step number 3 is to divide your weekly average deficit by 7. And if we divide 3,500 by 7, we get 500 calories. So on average, in the last 4 weeks, you were 500 calories below your current maintenance calories. Step number 4 is to work out your average caloric intake from the last 4 weeks. So how many calories were you eating on a daily basis? So first, you need to work out the average per week. So you would add up every single day of eating and divide it by 7. Super simple. Let's say you consumed 1,500 calories every day. Okay, no, that is not super simple. I cannot do 1,500 times 7. Oh, yes, I can. 10,500. It's just because 1,500 is a number a lot of my clients diet on, and I diet on, so I know the math really well. Anyway, so let's say you were so perfect with your math, which nobody is, that you ate 1,500 calories every single day for 7 days. So that's 10,500. All right. Then you divide it by 7. That's 1,500 calories. So on average, in 1 week, you were eating 1,500 calories. And then you do the same for the last 4 weeks. I'm not going to give you math-related examples because it's going to get really complicated. But anyway, once you have the weekly caloric intake for all 4 weeks, you add these all up and you divide them by 4, and you're going to get your average caloric intake every single day for all of the 4 weeks. Step number 5 is to add the estimated caloric deficit that you were in, so in this example, 500 calories, to your average daily caloric intake for the last 4 weeks. Super simple example, your average caloric intake was 1500 calories, you add 500 calories, you get 2000 calories. This is your current estimated maintenance. So around 2000 calories. You can also use a different option, which is an estimation. It's a faster method, but it's less accurate because it's based on averages extrapolated from research, not on your own individual data. And you can make these estimates based on the expected reduction in maintenance calories that I've discussed earlier that you can experience after a fat loss phase. This reduction is usually proportionate to the percentage of total body mass that you lost relative to your starting point, with greater losses yielding larger reductions in maintenance calories. So, as I was saying, in my interview with Dr. Eric Trexler, we covered the fact that, according to the paper by Rosenbaum and colleagues, people who lose around 10% of their original total body mass seem to experience up to a 25% reduction in total daily energy expenditure. For example, if your maintenance calories used to be 2500 when you were 10% heavier, they may now be as low as 1875. But again, this is an average. Some people may experience a smaller reduction than 25%. Others, unfortunately, may experience a bigger reduction than 25%. I also learned another valuable estimation from Dr. Stefan Guyenet. Sorry, his name is spelled very differently than how you say it, so it took me a second to remember. So Dr. Stefan Guyenet is the author of The Hungry Brain, which I strongly recommend you purchase and read. And according to his estimation, your maintenance calories may decrease by around 10 per day for every pound of body weight lost. So, if your original maintenance was 2500 calories and you've lost 50 pounds, based on this heuristic, your new maintenance would be 500 calories lower, so around 2000. Again, there are going to be some outliers, so what I would do is take the outcome you get from these two calculations with a pinch of salt and an open mind. And my suggestion would be to use the results of the two as two ends of your estimated maintenance range. So based on my example, you would set your maintenance target as 1875 to 2000 calories. I've given you two options, but how correct are they? Neither is absolutely 100% accurate because we are not robots and our body does not perfectly conform to the wonderful structure provided by mathematics, much as we would all love for that to be the case. Or at least I would love that. It would make life so much easier, right? And while option A offers a slightly more accurate estimation, it is still just that. It's an estimation. So when you increase your calories to maintenance after your fat loss phase, continue tracking your body weight trend on the scale and tweak your calorie target accordingly. In terms of expectations on the changes on the scale, in the first week back at maintenance calories, you can expect your body weight to go up by around 1 to 2% for the reasons that I've mentioned in the previous solo episode as well. You're eating more food, so you have more gut residue, which is food in your gut. You're eating more carbs, each gram of which is absorbed with 3 to 4 grams of water. The extra carbs you're eating are going to be stored in your muscles as glycogen if you train, which is going to result in better pumps, slightly bigger looking muscles, and also more weight on the scale. And you're going to have more energy and thus potentially train harder. And or you may change up your training program as you transition from a deficit into maintenance. Either way, as a result of this, you're going to experience more training-related inflammation, which also increases water retention. And this doesn't take into account the fact that you may be somebody with a period, and if you happen to get your period or to enter PMS, as you transition back to maintenance, you're likely to see an even greater increase in body weight than 1 to 2%, especially if typically you've been tracking your period and you've noticed that when you're PMSing or when you are in your first few days on the actual period, you do gain weight. In any case, the bottom line is don't panic because you're not regaining body fat. But for these reasons, you also can't use this initial data to ascertain whether your estimation of your new maintenance calories is correct. You need to wait until this adjustment period is over. And if your weight continues to trend up after these 1 or 2 weeks, then you're in a surplus. Vice versa, if your weight continues to go down, you're likely still in a deficit. Now, whichever scenario you're in, whether you realize, oh, I'm in a bit of a surplus or I'm in a bit of a deficit, I would adjust your calories respectively upwards or downwards by around 100 at a time. I wouldn't make a really sharp 100 of calories worth reduction or increase, and then I would wait to see if your body weight settles within a range of a few pounds, because you're not going to maintain 150 pounds exactly. You might maintain 147 to 152. The span of the possible fluctuations on a day-to-day basis really depends on the individual. But it's not unheard of to be within a range of several pounds and to see no changes in body composition. Ultimately, in addition to body weight, I recommend tracking pictures and or tracking your measurements. So you don't just rely on the number on the scale, you also rely on other metrics that in some way estimate your body composition. All right, so now you know how I would suggest estimating your maintenance. You know what to expect from changes in body weight when you transition back to maintenance. So what I want to cover next is how to start eating more after you're done with your diet. So how do you make that transition to the increase in caloric intake? And the first and most obvious option is to increase your calories to your estimated maintenance right away. And the main benefit of this is that the following favorable changes are going to happen faster. You're going to eliminate any symptoms of diet fatigue quicker. And these symptoms include excessive hunger, a lot of food focus, sometimes sleep issues, fatigue, mood swings. Basically, you get hangry, in quotation marks. And the degree to which you experience these depends on how long you've been dieting for, how aggressive your deficit was, and how much weight you've lost. Another favorable change that occurs more quickly is that you're going to revert metabolic adaptation. And the final favorable change is that you get to eat more food and enjoy more nutritional flexibility. However, the process of figuring out and implementing your new maintenance calories without fat regain can be daunting, especially if this is your first time being successful with fat loss. So my second option, which I also touched on in the previous solo episode, is to reverse diet. If you think that your new maintenance calories that you've estimated look really high, and you're afraid of eating that much straight out of the gates, there's nothing wrong with easing your way into it by upping your current intake by maybe 100, 150, 200 calories per week. On the plus side, this slower approach gives you the opportunity to minimize the chances of accidentally putting yourself in a surplus if your maintenance calorie estimation was a little bit too optimistic. A potential downside is that you're still going to be in a deficit for at least a couple of extra weeks. I say potential downside because this is actually great if you'd like to continue losing a little bit more fat. But it isn't ideal if you've been struggling with a lot of diet fatigue and you need to transition out of a deficit sooner rather than later. And if the concept of diet fatigue is still a little bit confusing, despite my quick explanation, I do have a podcast where I cover it in great depth, which is why you stop sticking to your diet and what to do about it, which is episode 53. And then there's a final in-between option between these two, which I use successfully with a lot of clients. And this is to estimate your maintenance calories, as I discussed earlier, and then you lower the result by 100 calories. For example, if you worked out that your new maintenance calories is around 1900 to 2000, set your initial target to 1800 to 1900 calories instead. And then you can adjust up or down based on future data. And the benefits of this third option is that it's a reasonable increase from your current deficit calories, which is going to help with diet fatigue, metabolic adaptation, and food flexibility. But it's also a more conservative approach than blindly trusting your initial calculations, which means you're less likely to get yourself in an accidental surplus. In other words, this third approach gives you more peace of mind than going straight to maintenance calories, and more food flexibility and respite from your fat loss phase than a slower reverse diet. The next topic I want to cover is how to change your food choices when you transition from a deficit into maintenance calories. For most people, transitioning out of a moderate deficit means increasing your calories by 3 to 500. This is a pretty substantial change, which is great because who doesn't like to eat more food? By now, you should know that I really like to eat. But it can be a discombobulating change when you've been used to having fat loss friendly meals and to limiting or avoiding higher calorie, more palatable foods for several months. Now, how can you start reintroducing these foods without going overboard, getting yourself in a surplus, and regaining fat? I would start simple. First of all, increase the portion sizes of the meals that you are already having. Second, transition away from the lowest calorie, leanest food sources that you can to still health promoting food sources that are a little bit higher in fat and palatability. For instance, if you've been eating a lot of egg whites and a lot of chicken breast, maintain some of the egg whites and some of the chicken breast, but reintroduce 1 or 2 whole eggs, and maybe switch out some of the chicken breast for salmon, which is a type of fatty fish, which is going to be higher in calories, but because they all come from omega-3 fatty acids, which are really important for health. Third, reintroduce higher calorie, highly palatable foods like ice cream, chips, cookies, and the like at a gradual pace, depending on your personality and the degree of diet fatigue that you're experiencing. If you have a lot of diet fatigue, a lot of hunger and food focus, and or personality-wise, you tend to lose control more easily around higher calorie, highly palatable foods, you may not want to reintroduce a lot of these foods too fast, because this could be a recipe for disaster. Instead, spend more time increasing your current portion sizes and switching to maybe slightly higher fat, higher calorie sources of food that are still health promoting, like salmon and eggs. Especially by having bigger portions of your fat loss friendly meals that are high in protein, fiber, and volume, you're going to feel fuller and therefore reduce your symptoms of diet fatigue. At the same time, by swapping out some of the leaner food sources you've been having with some health promoting but less lean sources, you're going to get a different variety of nutrients in your diet, and you're going to avoid making your fat loss friendly meals too big portion size wise to where now you're struggling to digest and you're feeling uncomfortable. Now, when you're no longer as hungry, food focused, and generally feeling like you're dieting, which is going to come after a little bit of time taking this approach I outlined, you likely be better able to control yourself around highly palatable, high calorie foods. And that is when you can start adding them back in a little bit at a time. On the other hand, if you're not experiencing much diet fatigue and or you're the type of person who can just stop after eating one cookie or a little square of chocolate, then you can reintroduce these discretionary foods at a faster pace. Importantly, there's no right or wrong timeline here. Eventually, you do want to increase diet diversity because it's beneficial to your physical health, but also to your mental health and your relationship with food. No one, most likely, wants to avoid ice cream and chips forever, and I am not advocating for that. There is room for all foods in a balanced diet, just not for any food in any quantity. And at the same time, you want to make the transition at the pace that best helps you avoid overeating and losing some of the progress that you've worked so hard for. The final topic I want to discuss today is what if, instead of transitioning out of a deficit for good, you're just taking a break and then you are going back into the deficit again. For instance, you're going away on vacation for a week, or you just want a week out of a deficit and then you're back into it. What then? Assuming that you're going to be at maintenance calories for a few days to a week, this isn't enough time to establish whether your body weight trend corresponds to a surplus, a deficit, or maintenance. Moreover, because of the body weight fluctuations that come with increasing calories, during a short deficit break, I've seen clients gain weight, lose weight, or stay roughly the same. It really depends on the person. And in any case, a single week isn't going to make or break your results. So even if you were still in a slight deficit, you'd be eating more calories anyway, which would still help with diet fatigue, which is the main reason why I would normally suggest a break from the deficit. And vice versa. Let's say you accidentally eat in a small surplus. Even then, a week isn't really long enough to regain any appreciable amount of fat. And if you manage that, you are doing some serious eating at that point. Like, you're not estimating your maintenance, you're just going to an all-you-can-eat buffet for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. For these reasons, even if your estimation of your current maintenance calories is slightly incorrect, it's not that crucial to the outcome of the overall diet. And in addition to that, since it's only a short break from the deficit, reverse dieting wouldn't make much sense. How are you going to reverse diet in 7 days at maintenance calories? Are you gonna increase your calories by 100 every day, so the only day your estimated maintenance is 1? You could realistically do that if you wanted to, but my point is, I don't think it's necessary to prevent an unfavorable outcome. So, in my view, if you are going to take a short break from your deficit, rather than reverse dieting, I would estimate your current maintenance calories and I would return to that number. Or you can take my more conservative approach where you calculate the number and then you reduce it by 100. So instead of going back to 2000, if that's the result of your estimation, you just eat up to 1900. With regards to the food choices to make during a short break from a deficit, it really depends on what you believe is going to propel you in your next stretch in a deficit. You want a deficit break to help you recover from diet fatigue and to help you continue sticking to your diet. So I'm going to give you 2 examples that ultimately come down to the same action. You decide to reintroduce donuts into your diet. So you want the extra calories you get at maintenance to come from a donut per day because you really love donuts. If you are the type of person who, after not having that particular food in their diet, they're going to be content with having it for the duration of the maintenance break, it's going to help them feel rejuvenated and you're going to go back into a deficit, no problem. And that is what you need to go back into it, no problem. Then knock yourself out. But there are also some people who either lose control by reintroducing even one high-calorie food into their diet because they're not at a place yet where they can moderate their consumption, and they can certainly work on that. And or they may then struggle at the end of the deficit break to go back into their deficit and therefore revert back to the fat loss friendly, health promoting foods they were eating before, because they would feel all of a sudden very restricted mentally after going YOLO for a week on all of those highly palatable, high calorie foods that they hadn't had previously during the deficit. So it may be better for them to get the majority or all of their extra calories during their deficit break from an increase in portion sizes as opposed to a reintroduction of highly palatable food. So again, it really depends on the individual, and you might have to experiment if you've never taken a deficit break before with the approach that works best for you. Take this as a learning experience and start with the approach that you think best suits your personality. Like if normally you have a history of really struggling to control yourself around highly palatable food, but also you don't want to completely go without any at all for the entirety of the maintenance break, then you can try somewhere in the middle, where the first couple of days you simply increase portion sizes, you're still eating primarily fat loss friendly, health promoting food, and then maybe by day 3 you add in a piece of chocolate or a cookie or something small and non-threatening, so to speak. Obviously this is a joke, like that. And then you see how you react to that, and you adjust as you go on. And that is a wrap for today's episode. As a quick summary, your post-diet maintenance calories are usually lower than they were pre-diet. After estimating the new maintenance calories, you want to use your body weight trend after the first or second week post-diet to ascertain whether the estimation is correct. And finally, I would recommend transitioning to a wider variety of food at the pace that best helps you avoid overeating. Thank you very much for listening. If this was helpful and you want to sign up for online coaching to take the results you're already getting thanks to listening to my podcast to a whole new level, please click on the link in the description where you can read more about the service, pricing, and you can apply for it. Otherwise, please support the podcast by leaving a 5-star rating or review on any podcast platform that you use. It is super helpful to help me reach more people. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I will talk to you next time. Lastly, if you want to support the podcast and help me reach more people, please leave a 5-star rating or review on any podcast platform that you're using. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.